So what's really interesting when you dive into acid reflux is it's actually can happen either when you have too much stomach acid or too little stomach acid. Okay, today we want to talk about the top 3 gut ailments and how you can make yourself feel better. So we all know gut issues can really mess you up, whether you're feeling uncomfortable from constipation or diarrhea is really throwing you off your rhythm or acid reflux keeps you up at night. This can really be an issue, especially if it becomes a chronic issue. So we want to break down today what is constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, what causes it commonly, and some tips on how you can improve the symptoms. So let's start with constipation. This is an issue that we hear about a lot from our customers at Omnibiotic, and we hope this will help. Yeah, and I was actually just recently researching this topic a little bit, and I was shocked to hear that especially women deal with a lot of these GI issues, whether it's IBS or constipation. Women disproportionately are affected by this, and some of this is hormones, but other factors going into it. But let's dive in. So, constipation. The definition of constipation is less than 3 bowel movements per week with hard, tough to pass stool. And there's a couple of different sort of common causes and solutions to it. So number one common cause of constipation is a lack of the right gut bacteria or just an overall diminished, out of balanced gut. Because we need our gut bacteria to, 1, effectively break down all the food that passes through our system, but 2, they also produce mucus that helps us move our stool through our intestines. Number 2, lack of fiber. Another thing that we spoke about in a recent episode as well, we need fiber as the food for our probiotic, good beneficial gut bacteria, but fiber also adds bulk to our stool. So essentially, again, it helps move it through our system at the right pace. In fact, it's estimated that about 95% of Americans are not meeting their daily fiber goal, which is crazy to think, and also just goes to show how many of our gut microbiomes are most likely suffering. Another common contributing factor to constipation can be dehydration. If we're not drinking enough water, especially if this is something that we're doing on an ongoing basis, sort of chronic dehydration, that definitely will impact our bowel movements because we need water to pull into our waste products in our intestines to actually, again, move it through. And then stress can be another one, essentially when our body switches into fight or flight mode, people can react differently. For some people, that essentially can lead to diarrhea, whereas for other people, it can lead to constipation for a variety of reasons that we won't get into. But so that's that. And then I guess another one to potentially mention is lack of movement. If we're sitting, and so many people of us, we're sitting all the time, it's, you're just not moving your body, you're not moving your lymph, you're not moving your whole GI tract. That can also lead to constipation. So looking back at these common causes that we just talked about, let's talk about some common solutions. Number 1, if our gut microbiome is off, we're lacking the right bacteria, and just like overall it's imbalanced, a good probiotic can definitely help. One of our fan favorites at Omnibiotic for constipation is Omnibiotic Balance. It contains some of the most sort of keystone strains for your gut that help make the right environment for all your other gut bacteria to thrive and also to help move your digestion along. If your constipation is more due to stress, then Omnibiotic Stress Release is your best friend. It was specifically designed to support your digestion during times of stress and also support that gut-brain axis that can help, support your mood and cognitive function. Lastly, if someone is dealing with like an acute bout of constipation, maybe you're traveling, you didn't drink enough water, there's also a new product that we launched called Caricol. It's a papaya-based product. I actually have the Caricol Gastro, which is slightly different, but it looks similar to this. It's little sachets. It has very potent papaya in it, and that can also really help to support your digestion if you're feeling constipated. Obviously, the others that we touched on, dehydration and stress, what are the obvious answers to that? Well, drink a lot of water, potentially electrolytes, especially in the summer, reduce sugary drinks and anything that can kind of mess with your gut that way, and make sure you move your body and you manage your stress. Yeah, and I'd love to add to that. I mean, walking after meals is so good to move your digestion along and improve that regularity, but it also helps control your blood sugar.
Yeah.
And there are wonderful yoga poses. I mean, just do a quick Google search, wonderful yoga poses to really eliminate constipation and help you go to the bathroom. And for stress, I love to think about this in terms of like mindful movement and breath work to really like release stagnant energy and like build heat in the body, because that can also move
that's
things
great.
along.
That's a great way of thinking about it. And you know, I think we'll get into this with the other ailments too, but if this is something you've truly been dealing with for a really long time, or it's getting to a point where it's really unmanageable, work with a practitioner who knows about gut health, do a good stool test, and get to the root cause.
And that's actually a really nice lead into our next digestive issue, which is diarrhea. And I want to note that, you know, if your digestion is usually quite balanced and you're feeling good and you have an acute bout of diarrhea, that is most likely a good reaction of your body getting rid of any pathogens that might be getting you sick. So, you know, we're talking about chronic diarrhea, where this is something you're dealing with on a very regular basis. And diarrhea is classified as having a bowel movement more than 3 times per day, and oftentimes the stool is watery and loose. So, yeah, common causes, I just touched on it, pathogens. So that can be a stomach bug, food poisoning, and again, this is actually a good reaction of your body to get rid of this pathogen if it's acute. However, if you have a pathogen overgrowth that your body just can't really get rid of by itself, a stool test, like you mentioned, is a really good tool to figure out what is going on in my gut microbiome, and then working with a practitioner to analyze results and address any of these imbalances. Another common cause is a food intolerance or a full allergy, like celiac disease. You know, I love to think of it as like, find the foods that don't love me back and avoid them, because diarrhea can be so detrimental to your quality of life and also your energy and immunity. It just like totally weakens your entire system, and it drains you, quite literally.
Quite literally. And also, you know, diarrhea often comes along with pretty intense inflammation in your gut, and as we've touched on in the past too, if you have inflammation in their gut, most likely that will turn into leaky gut, set off a whole cascade of immune issues. It's just not a good place to be.
And then another common cause, which relates back to constipation, is stress. Your body shifts into fight or flight mode too consistently, and that really can lead to either chronic diarrhea or chronic constipation. And we also know stress depletes the gut microbiome, which again fuels inflammation, leaky gut, more inflammation in the body, and it's
a vicious cycle.
Also, since you have the gut-brain axis, that constant stress in your life, you know, can lead to anxiety, to other mood disorders, to brain fog. So diarrhea is one part of like the stress and disease cycle.
Can I add one thing to this? When we think about diarrhea, especially if it kind of comes and goes, you know, you might even go a few weeks with feeling fine and then it comes back. You need to also make sure you're ruling out something like an actual GI condition, like an inflammatory bowel conditions, you know, celiac, you mentioned Crohn's disease, anything that can be more serious. So that's just my one addition to this. That's, you know, really important to remember.
And even beyond that, I know that if someone suffers from something like a Lyme disease or tick-borne illness, GI issues, and especially something like diarrhea, can be a real issue. And so if this is becoming a real issue for you and you're noticing that, then I do think it makes sense to also test for some of these other conditions. And obviously, again, work with a practitioner that's very well versed in gut health, and hopefully takes a holistic approach to looking at your body. Okay, so having covered common causes, let's look at solutions. One thing, first and foremost, we highly recommend doing a stool test. If you're having some of these chronic digestive issues, you need to figure out what is going on in your gut microbiome. Is there something throwing you off? And working with a practitioner to analyze the results and then address them properly. Next up, something that is very effective and a super seamless ritual is taking a premium probiotic, and especially our Omnibiotic 8010. Probiotic is wonderful for gut restoration, and it's also very effective in reducing diarrhea. So this probiotic has 10 strains that very much restores and maintains this good bacterial diversity in your gut. It's shown to reduce loose stool, especially after taking antibiotics or having a gut disruption, and it also actually contains probiotics that actively inhibit bad bacteria.
Yeah, at least certain bad bacteria.
Certain bad bacteria. Next, nutrition. Analyze what you're eating. Figure out, keep a food journal. Figure out if there's certain foods or food groups that are really causing this diarrhea. And then, in my opinion, try to avoid that, or maybe try to find a digestive enzyme that can help your body properly break down this food, and so that you don't have this issue like diarrhea. In my personal experience, actually, a few years ago, I found out that I have a bit of a histamine intolerance. So oftentimes when I would eat histamine-rich foods like avocado or tomato, and I love a good tomato pasta, bolognese, so I would get digestive upset. So adding in a simple histamine digesting enzyme has been a game changer for me. But again, I didn't figure that out on my own. I worked with a very well-versed practitioner.
Another good tip or good example for this is people who just have like a kind of quote regular lactose intolerance, right? Many people, as we age, we actually lose some of that ability to process lactose. For many, they do just fine on occasion if they just take a lactose enzyme and then they can drink their whatever latte or eat their ice cream. Now, it's still questionable whether that's something you should be doing then on a daily basis, but again, like it can be extremely beneficial to support your body in that way.
Yeah, if you're eating out and there's limited options, you have your enzyme on hand and you can support your body.
Let's talk about acid reflux next. This is actually a condition that is a condition of the stomach. So it occurs when stomach acid comes up through the stomach into our esophagus, and it can cause a bunch of very unpleasant sensations, including burning and a burning sensation in your esophagus, nausea, burping, and just it's not pleasant, and it especially can occur after meals. That's usually the telltale sign. So what's really interesting when you dive into acid reflux is it's actually can happen either when you have too much stomach acid or too little stomach acid, which is so counterintuitive to think that like if you have too little, that little stomach acid can still rise and create these issues in your esophagus. So let's break it down. So most common causes of reflux, especially if you have high stomach acid, is a diet of fatty and spicy foods, alcohol, carbonated drinks, anything that kind of irritates your stomach in that way. Obesity is a risk factor for acid reflux. Certain medications such as painkillers like ibuprofen, muscle relaxers, and blood pressure meds. Low stomach acid can often be caused by a bacterial overgrowth in your intestines that are then kind of just disrupting your entire digestive tract. Inadequate stomach acid production, which can actually be a medical condition, and because of that, it then impairs digestion, which just messes up how things move through your digestive tract.
I wonder why, because I know in pregnancy, reflux is a huge issue. I wonder why in those months.
Well, I think part of it is just the baby as it grows, it like literally compresses your stomach, so there's just not as much space.
So that's more like a physical
That's a physical
cause.
cause, exactly. And then I also wouldn't be surprised if there's something about like the changing hormones in women, but I'm not entirely sure about how all that works. But it's definitely just you're running out of space. So let's talk about some lifestyle and dietary modifications that we can take if we're dealing with reflux. Some of the most common ones that you've probably heard already are eating smaller, more frequent meals. So if our stomach is less full, even if we have slightly less stomach acid, we can just digest that food easier. The other is waiting 2 to 3 hours after you eat your last meal before you lie down. So that's kind of another issue of many people, they eat a really big meal at night, late at night, like 8 p.m., and then they go to bed at 9:30, and then they wonder why they're having reflux. So try to not lie down and try to eat just earlier, especially dinner. Avoiding common triggers. So we just talked about triggers being spicy foods, fatty foods, sodas, coffee, alcohol. If you know you're sensitive to acid reflux, especially if it's paired with some of these other risk factors like obesity and medications you have to take, definitely watch out for those triggers. chew and eat slowly. That's something I think we're all guilty of in today's day and age. When I was doing my health coaching training, one of the assignments we actually had was to time ourselves, how long it took us to finish like a regular plate of lunch or dinner. And I was shocked. Even though I was trying to eat mindfully, it still was like less than 5 minutes. And the goal assignment during our training was to try to get to 15 minutes. And it took real practice. And avoid lying down after eating. Now let's talk about specific things you can do if your acid reflux is because of low stomach acid. So one of the things, again, is eating slowly and really chewing thoroughly, because essentially that helps you break down your food further before it even reaches your stomach. Avoid, as much as you can, using acid-suppressing medications unless it was something that your doctor specifically prescribed, because if you already have low stomach acid and you're suppressing even more stomach acid, you're essentially just making the issue worse. And then the other thing you can do, which is really powerful for many people, is just including supplements or foods that help increase your stomach acid naturally. That's something like digestive bitters, bitter foods like arugula that, just kind of naturally helps increase that acid production, and even apple cider vinegar if you can tolerate it before a meal. Another thing which we love here at Omnibiotic, and I was so excited when we were able to introduce these products to the US, is this magical little thing called Caricol Gastro. It's essentially a combination of papaya and oats, but cooked and prepared in a very traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic way to really extract all these important nutrients and the healing properties of papaya and oat. And this was specifically developed to help people with acid reflux. And we've heard from so many people already that, especially if they're the individuals who don't have acid reflux all the time, but it's just they know they're prone to it because of travel, diet, lifestyle, they take one or two of these after a big meal or when they feel those first signs of acid reflux, and it makes a huge difference to them.
Yeah. Hannah, I wanted to ask you also, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, but how would you find out if your acid reflux is coming from an abundance of stomach acid or not having enough stomach acid?
I think that's something you'd have to test.
Okay.
I know that there are certain tests that you can do to test how your body reacts I think you have to ingest like a certain liquid or something, and then you see whether you're like reacting to it or not. It's definitely something you can test, and I think there's also ways you can test that by looking at like pancreatic enzymes, liver enzymes, something like that. But again, something that you really want a skilled practitioner. And I would say especially if you've just been told like, oh, you have acid reflux, take these acid blockers for the rest of your life without having had any conversation around some of these other factors, I would probably just like reevaluate that and maybe get a second opinion.
Yeah, and become your own health researcher and advocate as well.
Yeah.
In closing, let's recap. If you're dealing with constipation, think, am I eating enough fiber? Am I hydrating enough? Am I moving my body? However, is there a gut imbalance? Do I maybe need a little bit more targeted gut support, like with an Omnibiotic Balance or Omnibiotic Stress Release Probiotic? Diarrhea, again, is this acute? Fine, my body can probably deal with it. If it's a bit more chronic and persistent, maybe doing a stool test, addressing it with a practitioner, taking a restorative probiotic like Omnibiotic AB10. Maybe it's a food sensitivity, maybe it's stress and anxiety. And then with acid reflux, this is again figuring out, is this due to low stomach acid or high stomach acid? And then do I really need to take a prescription medication for this, or could I look at my lifestyle habits?
Exactly.
What am I eating? How am I eating? Am I laying down right after eating? And then is there any kind of natural support like this Caricol Gastro that naturally support our digestion and GI health?
Love it. One thing I would add to this AB10, that your point about diarrhea on AB10, yes, our body usually can probably muddle through like a food poisoning or like a weird thing we ate, but I still take AB10. Like even if I go eat out and I just don't feel great after, AB10 is on my radar for like the next at least 5 days, because you just never know, and it's just such an easy way to, protect your gut microbiome.
Yeah, and if you have something acute or you're recovering from a stomach bug, Adults can actually take several servings of AB10 per day.
Exactly.
So 2 to 3 servings per day. And
Yep.
then let's end with the tip of the day.
Yeah, the tip of the day, this time, since we did talk about gut ailments and also how you even define them, there is such a thing as the Bristol Stool Chart, which is honestly wild that this exists, but so helpful. It is essentially a chart that shows you the different types of bowel movement and helps you classify where you're at. So take a look at the Bristol Stool Chart, see where you would fall on this scale, and then really, assess based on what we just spoke about. Are there any little modifications you can make in your diet, your lifestyle, your supplement regimen that might help you get through this? So with that, we'll leave you.
Yeah, and please like, subscribe, and comment on our channel. We always love to hear from you. Give us any feedback or topics that you want us to explore. And thank you for tuning in.